I stood on my own front porch, arms full of groceries, staring at a door that wouldn't open. My key turned halfway before jamming. I tried again, jiggling the handle. Nothing. The bags were getting heavy, milk cartons digging into my forearms. "Talia?" I called through the window. No answer. I knocked, then pounded harder. Finally, footsteps echoed inside. The door cracked open, revealing my younger sister's face. She looked calm, almost bored. "Oh, hi, Nina," she said, not moving to let me in. "My key doesn't work," I said, shifting the groceries. "Did you change the locks?" Talia opened the door wider, but her body still blocked the entrance. Behind her, I could see unfamiliar suitcases stacked in our hallway. Voices drifted from the living room, voices I didn't recognize. "We had to make room," Talia said simply. "Jordan's parents moved in today. You'll be more comfortable in the attic." She said it like she was discussing the weather, like she hadn't just kicked me out of my own home. The grocery bags slipped from my hands. Oranges rolled across the porch as I stared at my sister's face, searching for any hint of guilt or regret. There was none. The attic smelled like dust and forgotten Christmas decorations. My bed had been shoved beneath the sloped ceiling, so low I'd hit my head every morning. A single bulb hung overhead, casting harsh shadows on the wooden beams. Downstairs, laughter echoed through the floorboards. Talia's voice mixed with deeper ones. Jordan and his parents, I assumed. Someone was telling a story about a fishing trip. Someone else clinked glasses together in a toast. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, looking around at what had become my prison. Boxes of old photo albums were stacked against one wall. My mother's sewing machine sat covered in a dusty sheet. This wasn't a bedroom. This was storage space with a mattress thrown in. The smell of dinner wafted up through the vents. My stomach growled, but I couldn't bring myself to go downstairs. Not yet. I needed time to process what had just happened. My own sister had moved strangers into our family home and banished me to the attic like some unwanted relative. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was only one person I could call. Marcia would understand. She always did. I couldn't sleep that first night. Every creak of the old house reminded me how everything had changed. This was the house where Dad taught me to ride a bike in the driveway, where Mom and I baked cookies every Christmas morning, where Talia and I used to build pillow forts in the living room. I'd supported Talia through everything. When she dropped out of college the first time, I paid her bills. When she couldn't find a job, I bought her groceries. When her last boyfriend left her heartbroken, I held her while she cried and promised her things would get better. What she didn't know was that I'd been paying the mortgage on this house for 3 years. When our parents died, they left behind debt and a half-paid house. Talia was too young and careless to handle it, so I quietly took over the payments. Last month, I made the final payment. The house was mine now, completely and legally, but I'd never told Talia. I thought we were family. I thought she'd always have my back, like I had hers. I thought home was a place where you belonged, not a place you could be kicked out of on a whim. I was wrong about a lot of things. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase while the house buzzed with activity below. Jordan's mother was rearranging the kitchen cabinets, complaining loudly about how young people organize things these days. His father had already claimed Dad's old recliner and was channel surfing at full volume. Talia knocked on the attic door as I zipped up my bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, genuine surprise in her voice. "I need some space," I said simply. "I'm staying at Marcia's for a few days." She actually looked relieved. "That's probably for the best. Jordan's family needs time to settle in. You understand, right? This is important for our relationship." I understood perfectly. She'd chosen her fiancé's comfort over her sister's dignity. She'd given away my space in my own home without asking. She'd made me feel like a stranger in the place where I grew up. "Sure, Talia, I understand completely." I walked past her down the narrow attic stairs, suitcase in hand. Jordan stood in the hallway, blocking my path with a smug smile. "Thanks for being so cool about this, Nina. Not everyone would be so understanding." I looked him in the eye and smiled back. "Don't mention it, Jordan. Really, don't mention it." Marcia's office smelled like coffee and legal documents. She'd been my best friend since college and my attorney since I started making real money. Her desk was covered with papers, but she pushed them aside when I walked in with my story. "Let me get this straight," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Your sister moved her unemployed fiancé's parents into your house and kicked you into the attic?" "That's right. And she doesn't know you own the house outright?" "Correct." Marcia opened her laptop and pulled up my property records. There it was in black and white. Nina Carter, sole owner. No mortgage. No liens. No shared ownership with anyone. "What do you want to do?" she asked, her fingers already moving toward the keyboard. "I want you to have full legal authority to act on my behalf regarding the property," I said, "and I want you to start preparing the house for sale." "You're sure about this?" I thought about waking up in that dusty attic while strangers lived in my parents' bedroom. I thought about Talia's casual dismissal, like my feelings didn't matter. I thought about Jordan's smug face. "I'm absolutely sure." I waited until the house was empty before I went back. Talia had posted on social media about a shopping trip with Jordan's mother. Bonding time, she called it. The men were at some sports bar, according to Jordan's latest selfie. I used my garage door opener and slipped inside quietly. The house felt different already. Jordan's cologne hung heavy in the air. His mother had replaced our family photos with pictures of their family. Dad's reading corner now held Jordan's gaming setup. I found my mother's porcelain vases shoved into a cardboard box labeled storage in thick black marker. Her delicate tea set was wrapped in newspaper and stuffed in the back of a closet. Dad's cufflinks, the ones he wore to my college graduation, were scattered loose in a junk drawer. They'd erased my parents like they were temporary guests who'd overstayed their welcome. 3 decades of memories reduced to boxes and storage bins. My hands shook as I carefully rewrapped Mom's vases and placed them in my car. This wasn't about the house anymore. This was about respect. This was about family. And clearly, I didn't have one anymore. The locksmith was efficient and professional. He didn't ask questions when I showed him the deed and requested all locks be changed immediately. Within an hour, every entrance to the house had new hardware. I was the only one with keys. I sat at Marcia's kitchen table that evening, addressing an envelope by hand. Inside was a formal notice. Notice to vacate. Property has been listed for sale. All occupants must vacate within 30 days. I included a copy of the deed and the new listing agreement. I mailed it to my own address, knowing Talia would be the one to find it. She'd probably laugh at first, thinking it was some kind of joke. Jordan would scoff and toss it aside. His parents would dismiss it as a bluff. They had no idea how serious I was. They'd pushed a quiet person too far, and now they were about to learn that quiet didn't mean weak. It meant I'd been thinking, planning, and preparing while they celebrated their takeover. My phone buzzed with a text from Talia. "Did you change our locks? My key doesn't work." I typed back, "Check your mail." Then I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Walking into my parents' bedroom for the first time since their funeral felt like stepping into a crime scene. The room reeked of Jordan's cheap cologne. His clothes were scattered across Mom's antique dresser. His parents' medications lined the windowsill where Mom used to keep her African violets. I remembered painting these walls with Dad when I was 16. We'd chosen a soft blue because Mom said it reminded her of morning skies. Now the walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating under the weight of strangers' belongings. Their king-sized bed sat where my parents' modest double bed used to be. They'd moved out the cherrywood nightstands that Dad built by hand and replaced them with some cheap particle board furniture. Even the ceiling fan was different, a gaudy brass monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a casino. This room had been sacred to me. It's where Mom read me bedtime stories when I had nightmares. Where Dad and I planned my college applications, where I said goodbye to them both during their final days. Now it was just another bedroom occupied by people who saw our home as their personal hotel. The disrespect cut deeper than I'd expected. Through Marcia's living room window, I watched my old house like a detective on a stakeout. Talia was hosting a dinner party in our formal dining room, the same room where we'd celebrated every Christmas, birthday, and graduation for 20 years. I could see Jordan's parents holding court at the head of the table, the same spots where Mom and Dad used to sit. Talia was playing hostess, serving wine and telling animated stories. Everyone was laughing, completely comfortable in their stolen paradise. They'd transformed our family home into their personal social club. The dining room where Dad carved the Thanksgiving turkey now showcased Jordan's father pontificating to a captive audience. The kitchen where Mom taught me to make her famous lasagna was now Talia's stage for playing house. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, watching strangers live in the spaces where my memories were made. But ghosts have power too. They can move through walls, shift things around, and make themselves known when least expected. Tomorrow they'd discover just how real this ghost could be. Ms. Doyle arrived at exactly 9 a.m. with her briefcase and for sale sign. She was efficient and professional, examining every room with the practiced eye of someone who'd been selling houses for 30 years. "Beautiful property," she said, making notes on her tablet. "Great bones, established neighborhood. This should move quickly." I handed her the deed, fully paid and fully legal. She scanned it briefly and nodded. "Clean title, no liens, no co-owners. Perfect. When would you like to start showing?" "Immediately." She raised an eyebrow. "What about the current occupants?" "They're not on the title," I said simply. "They have no legal claim to the property." Ms. Doyle had seen everything in her career. She didn't flinch at family drama or complicated situations. She just updated her listing and scheduled the first showing for that afternoon. "I'll need access to the property," she said. I handed her a key. "Use it whenever you need to. Don't worry about the people inside. They won't be there much longer." She smiled and shook my hand. "I like working with decisive clients, Miss Carter. This house will sell fast." The first showing was scheduled for 2 p.m. I parked across the street and waited. Doyle arrived with a young couple in their 30s, both carrying notebooks and measuring tape. They looked excited, eager, ready to make this house their home. Jordan's father answered the door in his undershirt and boxer shorts. I could hear his voice booming from the sidewalk. "What do you people want? This is private property." Miss Doyle remained calm and professional. She showed him the listing agreement and explained that she had authorization from the legal owner to show the property. The young couple looked confused and slightly alarmed. "There must be some mistake," Jordan's father insisted. "My son lives here with his fiancé. They own this house." "Sir, I have the deed right here," Ms. Doyle replied patiently. "The owner has authorized this sale. You're not listed on the title." I watched him deflate slightly as the reality sank in. He called for Jordan, who appeared in wrinkled pajamas and bed hair. The conversation grew heated, but Ms. Doyle was unflappable. She'd dealt with situations like this before. The young couple toured the house while Jordan and his father stood helplessly in the driveway, making phone calls and looking increasingly panicked. Talia's meltdown was spectacular. I heard about it from 3 different neighbors who called to check if I was okay. Apparently, she'd discovered the showing was real when she came home to find strangers measuring her bedroom windows. She'd started screaming about family betrayal and legal action. Then she'd gone into the kitchen and systematically smashed every piece of our grandmother's china set, the same dishes Mom had saved for special occasions and holiday meals. According to Mrs. Henderson next door, Talia had thrown each plate individually, sobbing about how I was destroying the family and spitting on our parents' memory. The crash of breaking porcelain echoed through the neighborhood for 20 minutes. When I drove by later, I could see the mess through the dining room window, shards of blue and white china scattered across the hardwood floor like broken dreams. The pattern had been in our family for 4 generations. Now it was garbage. I didn't feel sad about the dishes. They were just objects, and objects could be replaced. What couldn't be replaced was the trust Talia had shattered when she kicked me out of my own home. Some things, once broken, could never be put back together. The offer came in at full asking price within 48 hours. The young couple had fallen in love with the house despite the drama of their first visit. They waived the inspection and offered a 30-day closing with no contingencies. "It's a cash offer," Ms. Doyle told me over the phone. "They want to move fast. Are you interested?" I was sitting in Marcia's backyard, watching her kids play on their swing set. Normal family life happening all around me while my own family imploded. But that was okay. I was building something new now. Accept the offer, I said. Schedule closing for 3 weeks from today. Miss Doyle paused. That's very fast. Are you sure you're ready for this? I thought about Talia's casual dismissal when she'd banished me to the attic. I thought about Jordan's smug face. I thought about his parents treating our family home like their personal vacation rental. I'm absolutely ready. The sooner, the better. That evening, I signed the purchase agreement. $720,000. Not bad for a house my parents had bought for $60,000 30 years ago. The money would set me up nicely for whatever came next. Talia cornered me in Marcia's office 3 days later. She'd been calling and texting non-stop, but I'd blocked her number, so she'd shown up in person, her face red and puffy from crying. This is family betrayal, she announced dramatically, loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. You can't sell our parents' house. It's not right. Marcia stepped in smoothly. Miss Carter, your sister is the legal owner of the property. She has every right to sell it. But it's our family home, Talia insisted, turning back to me. We grew up there together. Mom and Dad wanted us both to have it. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in weeks. She seemed smaller somehow, deflated. The confident woman who'd casually kicked me upstairs was gone, replaced by someone desperate and scared. You moved in your in-laws and kicked me upstairs like a burden, I said quietly. I'm just returning the favor. That was different. We needed space for Jordan's family. And I need space for my life, without people who don't respect me. She stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. The official notice was posted on the front door the next morning. Big, white, legal-looking, impossible to ignore. Notice to vacate, property sold. Ms. Doyle had attached a copy of the purchase agreement and the closing date. I drove by around lunchtime and saw the whole family gathered on the front porch, passing the notice around like it was written in a foreign language. Jordan's mother was gesturing wildly. His father was pointing at various parts of the document. Jordan himself looked like he'd seen a ghost. Talia was on her phone, probably calling every lawyer in the phone book. Good luck with that. Marcia had already confirmed that everything was legal, proper, and ironclad. No amount of legal consultation would change the basic facts. I owned the house, I could sell it, and they had no say in the matter. Jordan finally noticed my car across the street. He said something to his father, who looked up and glared in my direction. I waved politely and drove away. Let them glare, let them plot, let them make all the phone calls they wanted. In 3 weeks, that house would belong to someone else, and they'd be someone else's problem. Jordan's parents showed their true colors that evening. Mrs. Ruiz called me ungrateful and selfish during a screaming voicemail rant. Mr. Ruiz went further, threatening to sue me for emotional distress and elder abuse. You can't just throw old people out on the street, he huffed into my voicemail. We have rights. We'll see you in court. I saved every message and forwarded them to Marcia. She listened to the recordings with the calm expression of someone who'd heard every threat in the book. Empty bluster, she said, making notes in my file. They have no legal standing, no claim to the property, and no case. Let them waste their money on consultation fees. But the threats revealed something important. They were genuinely scared. For the first time since this whole mess started, they were beginning to understand that I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't a negotiation or a family squabble. This was business. Mrs. Ruiz left one final message that night. We should have known better than to trust someone so cold-hearted. Cold-hearted? Maybe. But warm hearts had gotten me kicked into an attic while strangers took over my home. Sometimes you had to freeze your heart to protect it. Talia's final card was emotional manipulation. She showed up at Marcia's house during dinner, tears streaming down her face, carrying a framed photo of our parents. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you, she sobbed, holding up the picture like evidence in a trial. They raised us to be family, to stick together no matter what. I took the photo and studied our parents' faces. They looked so young and happy, standing in front of the same house I was about to sell. They'd worked so hard to build something lasting for their daughters. You're right, I said finally. They would be ashamed. They'd be ashamed that I let you treat me like a burden in my own home. They'd be ashamed that you moved strangers into their bedroom before their graves were even settled. Talia's face crumpled. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, Talia. Tell me how kicking your sister into the attic was an act of love. She couldn't answer because there was no answer. She'd made her choice, and now she was living with the consequences. I paid off their house, I continued. You've been living off me for years. You just didn't know it. I returned to the house one final time to collect Dad's camera and the photo albums from the attic. The family was gathered in the living room, having what looked like a crisis meeting. Maps and rental listings were spread across the coffee table. I slipped in through the back door and up the narrow attic stairs. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, dusty, cramped, unworthy of human habitation. How had I ever thought this was acceptable? Dad's old camera sat in its leather case, still loaded with film from his last vacation. I tucked it carefully into my bag, along with the albums that chronicled our childhood. These were the only things in the house that truly mattered to me. I left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. Take what you want from the house. Nothing here holds meaning for me anymore. The closing is in 2 weeks. Nina. Short. Simple. Final. I walked out the front door without looking back, past the family still huddled over their maps and listings. None of them looked up as I left. They were too busy trying to figure out how to solve a problem that had no solution. The desperate truth came out during week 2. Jordan finally admitted to Talia that he was completely broke. No job, no savings, no prospects. Talia had been living paycheck to paycheck, spending every dollar on clothes and entertainment. And Jordan's parents? Their own home had been foreclosed on 2 years ago. They'd all been living in fantasy land, treating my house like their personal safety net while contributing nothing to its upkeep or mortgage. The house wasn't just their comfort, it was their only security. Now that security was about to disappear, and they had nowhere to fall back on. No relatives willing to take them in, no savings to rent an apartment, no credit good enough to qualify for a lease. Marcia called me with updates she'd heard through the neighborhood gossip network. They're calling everyone they know, looking for somewhere to stay. So far, no takers. I felt a brief flutter of sympathy, then remembered the smug look on Jordan's face when he'd thanked me for being understanding about my own eviction. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. That's not my problem anymore, I told Marcia, and I meant it. Closing day arrived with all the ceremony of a business transaction, which is exactly what it was. I sat across from the young couple, Sarah and Mike Chen, and watched them sign paper after paper with excitement in their eyes. Mr. Doyle guided us through each document with professional efficiency. Purchase agreement, deed transfer, title insurance, final walkthrough confirmation. The Chen's baby daughter slept peacefully in her carrier, dreaming about the backyard where she'd take her first steps. When the final page was signed, Miss Doyle handed me a wire transfer confirmation. $720,000 minus fees and commissions. More money than my parents had ever seen in their lifetime, now sitting in my account. Congratulations, Sarah Chen said, shaking my hand. We promise to take good care of the house. I know you will, I replied, and I meant it. They'd love that house the way it deserved to be loved. They'd fill it with new memories, new traditions, new generations of family photos. Outside the title office, I took one last look at the paperwork that had changed everything. Then I drove to my new apartment to start the rest of my life. The movers arrived at exactly 8 a.m., just as I'd scheduled. I watched from Marcia's car as the professional crew began systematically emptying the house. Sarah and Mike Chen followed close behind, measuring rooms and discussing furniture placement. Talia stood barefoot on the front lawn in her pajamas, screaming at anyone who would listen. You can't do this. This is our home. Call the police. But the police had already been called by a neighbor, and they'd confirmed that everything was legal and proper. Jordan threw a full tantrum in the driveway, kicking boxes and shouting about lawsuits that would never come. His father sat wheezing on the front steps, clutching his chest dramatically. His mother wailed about being thrown out like trash. But nobody helped them load their belongings. Nobody offered a spare room or a couch to sleep on. Neighbors watched from their windows like it was afternoon entertainment. By noon, everything was out. The Chen family did their final walkthrough, while my former housemates stood surrounded by their possessions on the sidewalk, looking lost and defeated. The moving truck pulled away, and Sarah Chen locked the front door with her new keys. The transaction was complete. Talia's final plea came that evening. She showed up at my new apartment, a bright, modern place with huge windows and space that was entirely mine. She looked exhausted, defeated, carrying a photo of Jordan's young nephew. "Let us stay," she begged. "Just for a few weeks while we figure things out. Think about Lucas. He's just a kid. He didn't do anything wrong." I looked at the photo of the 8-year-old boy, innocent and smiling. He really hadn't done anything wrong. But neither had I, and that hadn't stopped his family from treating me like an unwanted burden. "You chose them over me," I said simply. "You chose Jordan's comfort over your sister's dignity. You chose his parents' convenience over our family's respect. So now you can choose somewhere else to live. Please, Nina, I'm begging you. You had a choice in that attic, Talia. You could have asked me how I felt. You could have discussed it like family. Instead, you decided for me. Well, now I'm deciding for you." She left crying, but I didn't change my mind. I'd learned that sometimes being family means setting boundaries, not enabling bad behavior. I drove past the house one last time the following week. The Chen family had already started making it their own. New welcome mat, fresh flowers in the window boxes, children's toys scattered across the lawn. Across the street, I could see the remnants of my family's drama. A neighbor was shaking her head while talking to her husband. Another was pointing at the spot where Jordan's family had spent their last night arguing on the sidewalk. "Some people don't know when they've burned the last bridge," I overheard one woman tell another. She was right. Talia had burned our bridge the moment she chose strangers over her sister. She'd set fire to 30 years of shared history with a casual dismissal and a key that didn't work. But bridges could be rebuilt if both sides wanted to do the work. So far, Talia had only offered blame and demands, never acknowledgement or apology. Maybe someday she'd understand what she'd lost. Maybe someday she'd be ready to rebuild. Until then, I had my own life to construct. My new apartment felt like freedom. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen, all mine. No strange voices in the hallway, no foreign smells in the air, no strangers rearranging my memories. I decorated carefully and deliberately. Dad's reading lamp sat beside my favorite chair. Mom's silk scarf was draped over the back of my couch. The photo albums occupied a place of honor on my bookshelf, 3 items from 30 years of family history. That's all I'd kept from the house where I grew up. Everything else was just stuff, replaceable, forgettable, ultimately meaningless without the people who made it matter. That evening, I sat down with a legal pad and wrote my new will. Simple, clear, final. I leave my entire estate to the Children's Hospital Foundation. Talia's name appeared nowhere in the document. Marcia would store it in her safe, along with all the other documents that proved I'd learned to protect myself. Family wasn't guaranteed. Love wasn't automatic. But self-respect? That was something I could control, and I'd never give it away again. 6 months later, I found myself flipping through the old photo albums in my quiet living room. I stopped at one picture. Talia at age 6, gap-toothed and grinning, standing next to me at our family lake house. We looked so happy, so innocent, so sure that we'd always be each other's best friend. I touched the photo gently, remembering that little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when I left for college, who called me her hero when I helped her with homework. Somewhere along the way, that little girl had grown into someone who could look her sister in the eye and say, "You'll be more comfortable in the attic." Someone who could choose strangers over family without a second thought. I closed the album and whispered to the empty room. "You were my family, Talia. You chose strangers. I chose peace." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, left ashes too deep to clear. Some choices once made carved canyons too wide to cross. I turned off the lamp and went to bed in my own space, in my own home, surrounded by my own choices. For the first time in years, I slept without wondering if I'd wake up unwelcome. Peace, I discovered, was worth more than family that didn't act like family. and I'd finally learned the difference.